dive in. Hello, welcome to our monthly sync up with product management and CS. So just a few things to highlight. We have a quarterly strategy review. We had one last month. There's a lot of good content in there. If you have a chance to review it, I highly recommend it. If you're just looking for a good overview of the protect stage or an understanding of what our strategy is for the next 6 to 12 months is really the content that's covered in there. Just agenda items, I wanted to highlight a few big things that are coming out here in Protect. In 14.0, we're making that switch from Claire and Clar over to Trivy for our container scanning engine. That's actually already live in GitLab.com. And then for self-managed, it'll be available with the official 14.0 release. We've had some really good positive feedback from nearly all of our customers on that. And it fixes a lot of underlying bugs we had. I think we closed out over 20 issues by making that switch. It gives us more up-to-date vulnerability data and support for more distributions. And it also lays the ground for us to be able to start scanning containers running in a production environment, which is actually one of the big reasons why we made that switch to begin with. Trivy is an open source project by AquaSecure, and they have a sister company, or not company, a sister project called Starboard that lets you grab that information. So making that switch had a lot of really positive benefits for us. And you actually see that it says 14.2 in the agenda, but we actually probably have the first iteration of scanning containers in production out in 14.1. So hot on the heels of that switch. And then the other upcoming item also in 14.1 is our security policies. We've been releasing that over the past several iterations here, but behind a feature flag. We've been working on the UI for that to make it a lot more user-friendly. Right now, with the first release of security policies, the only policy you can write is at the project level to require DAST scans to run as part of the pipeline. The way we work at GitLab is iterative, so that's really where only a starting point, but we're planning to turn that on turn the feature flag on by default in 14.1, so that'll be visible to customers. And shortly after, we're going to start expanding that to support things like secret detection and SAST, and then we'll be moving that up so you can write group level and workspace level policies. But a lot of big release items coming out here in the near term. With that being said, Pete, do you have anything you want to cover? Are you seeing anything from the field regarding Protect, which would be container scanning or security policies or anything related to production security?
I'm seeing a lot more things that are in the compliance area. Is Protected going to cover, is compliance fall under that, or is that under a different area?
So our compliance team is not under Protect. Our compliance team is actually under Manage, in the Manage stage. But we are working pretty closely together, and there is some degree of overlap there. Like, we're actually looking internally to start scanning all of the containers running in production to meet SOX requirements, right? So there is some overlap between the two groups. Same thing if you're talking about like requiring SAST or DAST to run as part of a pipeline, there's definitely a lot of overlap there. We did publish a video, and I can link it in here, talking about the joint vision and how we see our two efforts converging. But yeah, compliance itself would be a different group.
Okay. Yeah, we just happen to see a lot of that coming up more and more. And what was the main reason for switching container scanning to Protect from Secure?
Yeah, great question. Protect has been focused on protecting things running in production, and one of the big requirements in that area is doing vulnerability scanning for what's actually in production. A lot of customers have things that they've deployed an embarrassing amount of time, in the past, and haven't updated or haven't kept up to date, or they're not even necessarily aware of what all is out there. I've had some customers hint that they have stuff running even from like 3 to 5 years ago that was deployed. And so if you have like a customer that's using CD and they're constantly deploying, every day to production, the difference between what you scan in your pipeline and what you scan in production is going to be pretty much the same. But if it's like 3 years ago, obviously, you're going to have a lot of vulnerabilities that have accumulated in that production environment that you're not going to see just by scanning what's in your source code repository. And so container scanning is really the first place to start when we think of production scanning, just getting a baseline of what packages are out there and what known CVEs and vulnerabilities are out there is really, again, it's the first place to start with all of that. So it made a lot of sense to move it over to Protect so that we didn't, rather than re-engineering a totally new solution for production scanning, it made sense to keep that solution for pipeline scanning and production scanning the same and bring that along for the ride. So that's why we moved it over, was just, it wasn't getting a lot of work back in Secure. And just architecturally, it made sense to have the same team work on both.
Thanks. That's great information. Really to be able to tell customers that we can use this in production is going to be awesome. So looking forward to that. The other thing that I've seen, and it's not just with container scanning, but with some of the other, what some of the other vendors provide right now is they provide services to actually provide remediation services. And I think that's one of the challenges that we're having here, because we don't provide that service. And some companies, that's really critical to them because they don't have the team in place to actually, know how to fix some of these issues. So I did want to just at least bring that up. I know it's not just for container scanning, but in general, if we could maybe look at providing a service like that, or partnering with somebody that could provide that, that might be helpful in the future.
Yeah, so if I had a customer ask me that today, the way I would respond is I would point at our auto suggested solutions for vulnerabilities. So we don't want to just auto remediate things, because that has the potential to break things, and we never want to break their production environment. But we do have the ability in GitLab to auto suggest fixes and even auto create an MR for them to go and apply. So again, if I had to sell like what exists today, that's kind of what I would focus on, is look, we're giving you some guidance around how to fix that as part of GitLab. But yeah, long term, I mean, getting into like a managed service provider model where we're actually, handling those vulnerabilities for somebody, I don't think we have interest. At least I have not heard any discussions in GitLab of us heading into that area ourselves. So that might be a good, if they really want that full kind of remediation management, then you might look at bringing a partner in to the deal where, a traditional MSSP might do that kind of, service for them and go through and do those remediations.
Yep, because we did a POV, and that was one of the things that, that why they're leaning towards the other tools is because they had those services. So a partner might be the way to go. I'll talk to our channels team and see, if we have partners like that out there.
Yeah, absolutely. That's probably your best bet to go. There are companies that do that exclusively, and I'm sure we could just partner with them to provide a joint quote to the customer that's all inclusive of both. Samir, you've got an item?
I do. So from a hot issue perspective, the executive order, which I just linked over in the doc, have you had a chance to review the order? Do you know what's going on with that?
Yeah, I know one of the big elements is that they're requiring any vendor to provide an SBomb, like a software bill of materials. I am familiar with it. I've not read the whole thing.
Yeah, I mean, it's essentially, the backdrop is the supply chain problem with SolarWinds, and then subsequently the Colonial Pipeline problem, which really wasn't a supply chain problem, but it was just a cybersecurity issue. So it's really around how to find and fix things quickly, and then how do software vendors provide software bill of materials. So that brings us to an interesting question that once that becomes a standard practice, the definition of SBomb actually has been provided by the federal government. So let me find that. Here we go. So the National Telecommunications and Information Administration has defined SBomb in this document here. Put that link here. Definition. So this is the definition that they are going by. It's not exactly, and I'm not sure if it is exactly aligned with our definition or the industry definition, but this is how they define it. This is going to sort of become the baseline of what they think is the software bill of materials. Now, there are multiple components to this. One is what you find in the scan while the product is being developed, which is static bill of materials. And then there can be dynamic ones. Particularly case in point is, the SolarWinds thing was a dynamic link library. So yes, while it was required while the product was being compiled, the fact of the matter was the component was actually getting called in real time. So there is a very interesting conversation going on back and forth around where and when does the SBomb become complete. So kind of bringing it back to the whole protect conversation here is SBomb isn't necessarily, in my opinion, just the libraries that you're putting into your product. In the container world, it can be the containers you're inheriting as part of the layers that you're developing, right? So it could be a combination of the two. And then there are many others, which package you use, and then which package manager you use, and then how is that? I mean, there's like so many vectors of where software bill of materials comes into play. Just something that I think we need to be actively discussing. I know Jonathan Hunt has sort of taken a little bit of a front runner role in working with the NIST, but I think from a product perspective, we need to have a little bit thought on our definition and how we see the world in DevOps. So that's just something I would highly recommend. If you want me to create an issue somewhere so we can have this discussion, I'll be happy to do that. I don't know where we want to take this and how this kind of affects specifically protect, but I would think it does.
Yeah, absolutely. So are you both familiar with our dependency list that we have in the product today?
Yes, and from what I understand, that's just what is scanned in the pipeline. Is that correct?
Yeah, so right now that dependency list is only generated from our dependency scanning job. So it only looks at software dependencies, like software package dependencies specifically. What's not included is a listing of all of the packages in the container. So, what we really need to make a full SBomb, I would say that we have a partial SBomb today, but to have a complete SBomb, and include those elements that you were referring to earlier, Samir, of the things that are in the container and in the various image layers. What we really need to do is include the operating system level packages in that list. So that is something that we'd like to do. The that is at least notionally on our roadmap. We just haven't done it yet. So from like a current standpoint, we've got a listing of all of the software dependencies, and actually that tends to be in a lot of ways the harder thing to do, just because getting all of that means, you've got to do that for all the different languages, and every language has its own lock file. Like getting that listing of those dependencies is actually a little bit more complex than just getting a listing of the container packages. So if a customer needs to generate an SBomb today, what they could do is just run, depending on their operating system, something like apt list installed, where that would spit out a listing of all of the packages that are installed at the operating system layer. And then if they pair that with what's in the dependency list, they would have at least what I would consider to be a complete SBomb. Obviously that's a workaround and not an ideal solution, but we do want to eventually bring those in and add those into that dependency list as well, so that they don't have to go do that on the side and merge those together. They've just got it all in one place.
Yeah, no, that's I think that's excellent advice, and it does make sense. And I think where we are grappling a little bit is trying to understand how to approach the customer, because we don't want to, we can't do everything. That's a given. But where we can do something and how we differentiate ourselves against competitors, I think that's sort of the messaging that we would have to put together. So, but this I thank you for sharing this, because this is, I'd never even thought of something simple like this, right? And the simplicity is the beauty of it, is you don't have to install like 40 million different things to make this happen. This is literally a simple command that you run in your CI job. You grab the artifact and you're done. That's awesome.
Right. Yeah. Getting the listing is not hard, especially for operating system level packages, because it's just one command, right? Like I said, we're actually doing all of the hard part for them, which is getting a list of all of those software dependencies, because that would be way more than one command to go figure all of that out. So, we've done all of the heavy lifting. Obviously, we have a product gap that we need to close to, so customers don't have to, manually add these things to their CI pipeline, and it's just all there. But again, we've done the hardest part of that. And if a customer needs a complete SBomb, it's not a heavy lift for them to do that workaround and get it today.
Cool. Awesome. The other interesting thing that I'm seeing is really the switch over to Trivy. I think you mentioned that in the beginning. I might have missed some of that discussion. You said switch from Claire to Trivy. So so one of the customers asked us like why, and then the second thing they asked us is, what do I have to do? So if when I upgrade to 14.0, obviously there will be some instructions, but is there anything else that I need to think about in terms of the result sets that I get? Those are the two common questions that come up. And maybe you have addressed this, and I just, you just need to point me to somewhere, or if not, then I just want to bring that up.
Yeah, so why switch to Trivy? I did cover this at the beginning, but I'm happy to go through it again. We had several reasons. One, so probably the biggest one that's most immediately impactful for customers is that the Claire project that we were using, and this is more technical detail than you would share with a customer, but we were actually using a small offshoot of the main Claire project because it made it a whole lot easier for us to run the scans in a CI/CD pipeline. That offshoot was poorly maintained, and it started to have some issues with its upstream vulnerability data sources. And so we tried to work with those maintainers, and it was largely unsuccessful. It seems like that particular project we were using was just not being well maintained. So we were left with a few options. We could go back to the main, underlying core Claire project and build in that extra functionality ourselves, which would be obviously costly and time consuming. Or we could switch to a new provider. So customers on Claire and Clar right now, some of their vulnerability data feeds are not up to date. So they're not getting the latest vulnerabilities right now. Incidentally, moving to Trivy allowed us to close like almost 20 bugs and issues and feature requests that we had open. It also allowed us to support an additional operating system in addition to what Claire had. So it had better operating system coverage. It supports distroless. And then probably the biggest reason though, on top of all of that, was we wanted to start scanning containers running in production. And doing that with Claire was going to be fairly difficult. When we looked at the options, Trivy was a clear winner in that area. Trivy has a sister project called Starboard that lets you go grab all of the images running, from a production environment and scan those. So moving to Trivy is what's enabling us to do this production container scanning. So it was a combination of all four of those, but in the end, we did a fairly detailed analysis of Claire versus Trivy, and it was, it's not like Trivy was a clear winner all the way, but Trivy generally was better than Claire. When you come down to some of the detailed aspects, they have more data sources than Claire. They're just better maintained, in our opinion, but lots of reasons going into that decision.
Well, thank you for recapping that. I appreciate that.
For your second question, what do customers need to do to switch to Trivy? The answer is it depends. We have our documentation is live. It's been live for a few months, and I can include a link to that. But the short answer is if they're using Auto DevOps, they shouldn't need to change anything. If they have customized some of their variables, then they may need to go through and review some of those custom container scanning variables and make sure that they're compatible with the new scanner.
Cool.
Time has flown. We are almost at time. Thank you for all the great feedback. Are there any other points that we should cover on the call today?
No, I think keep doing what y'all are doing. It's awesome work. And we are now in the AST as a challenger, which is awesome, just in a general sense, secure plus protect. Just keep doing more of what you're doing. Thank you.
Thanks for the update, Sam. That was great.
Absolutely. Thank you. Have a good one.